Thank you for this. Now, you heard that I'm an executive director of a global think tank. That comes with it quite a great deal of responsibility, and we focus on and promote prosperity in quite a sense. So it's not just about money to us. Actually, deep at the heart of society, civil society, and our nations is a whole sense of shared values that we want to unearth. And we have a flagship product, and it's called the Prosperity Index. And in that, we put all our effort and we put all our vision into that index. And it's one of our main pillars. But what we also do is look at the various different organizations of the world that are promoting culture. Culture is really, really important to us because, as you know, or maybe some of you would disagree, but I think that all diplomacy is cultural, ultimately. So whether it's military, security, the environment, all those issues are an expression of our values and beliefs. And I think I can speak as a Canadian because I'm Canadian, but I think that's embedded in the Commonwealth. And those of you who are particularly familiar with UK policy, you can see that the Commonwealth, the 53 countries and a third of the world's population, is rising up through the mist that it might have been under to a real global geopolitical force to be reckoned with. And as policy decision makers are looking for answers, increasingly those people involved in the policy conversation are looking to the Commonwealth for those exact things, the shared values. Now, how do we express that as a think tank? I'm looking at my banner, but you'll find that there's a number of different brochures around so you can find out more about us. There's two particular programs of work I'd like to tell you about. The first one is transitions. So what we do is we have a team of people looking at countries in deep transition. We think that's the point at which we can probably have the most voice in hoping that they can transition into a stable society which is based on shared values and culture. Now, in the Transitions Forum, there's many different things that we do. Anne Applebaum, who you might know, runs that Transitions Forum. She's a world-famous author. But we have a new program of work on propaganda. And I think this is very important for the question tonight, which is around cultural diplomacy. I think propaganda at the moment is probably a kind of hidden third war, if you like, a hidden war. And what we'd like to do as an institute is we'd like to have a voice in that discussion. And we are highlighting through this program the different tools that some are using in the propaganda war, so that we are enabling people who are in the media, in television broadcast, wherever it may be, to spot propaganda. And let's unearth the values of society rather than be victims of the smokescreen or bamboozled by some of the commentators. Another thing we do is called the culture of prosperity. And this is where I think there is the greatest match in terms of the mission with our two institutes. The culture of prosperity is a look at history, because it's through history, as the High Commissioner said, it's through history, it's that lens that's most important in understanding our culture and values, and so that we understand policy making today. And we hold the history of capitalism, a whole lecture series that's lasting for over 3 years. And it's our biggest events at the Institute. People are hungry to understand what's happened in the past so we can appreciate what the solutions are in the future. And there is a vacuum, there's no question about it in policy making today. But we also look at roads to freedom. I think freedom is another issue that comes into this debate. And roads to freedom highlight where there might be barriers to liberty and freedom and how we might move those out of the way. And then I think most important of it all is we're looking at the importance of preserving your cultural heritage. This is what you spoke about. This is vital to look after, because what it does is it creates a legacy for those coming behind us to appreciate our values. Whether that's through architecture or theatre or books, you must in some way positively, as decision makers, hold on to that culture and those values. And I think that's about enough from me, but I'm very happy to take questions on anything to do with policy
Yes,
and
if you allow me,
politics.
as a moderator, of course, we take questions for the High Commissioner, His Excellency, and of course, Madam President. He's the President of the think tank. Madam President, please, a beautiful question. A critical, come on. Okay, I had one question myself a few minutes ago. Rise, because I was very frank, Your Excellency. I was just going to get a photograph with the flag, and one of the person opened it up. He said, "Oh, I don't know who was that. Oh, he's gonna come." Now, what is the significance of having a gun on the flag, please?
Yes. Well, it's a very good question. Actually, many people do ask, and some people look at it and never ask, so they never know why we have a gun on the flag. We have a gun which signifies the liberation struggle through which the country achieved independence. Our independence was tried by peaceful means with the Portuguese authorities of the day in 1964, but because the Portuguese regime of that time, which was a fascist regime, which was oppressing even the people of Portugal, didn't accept that, then an armed struggle ensued until 1975. 74, actually, when there was a revolution in Portugal, and then a new regime came in Portugal, and but for 10 years, there was, from 64 to 74, there was an armed struggle, and that gun represents the struggle for independence. Some years ago, the government and parliament tried to change the symbol, to take the gun out and put something new. The people came out and said, no, we have many other things to worry about than to change our symbols. That has history, and we have no problem with that. It represents our history. It's part of our history. Please don't change that. Excuse me. So it was left like that. That's why you have the gun. It's a symbol of
excellent answer for the person who was that. I don't say who was that, but of course you got your question, your answer. Yes. Any other question?
I'm just
Yes.
wondering about the colors. It's really beautiful, by the way.
Oh, yeah.
What colors?
Yeah, the colors. Well,
I hope you
the
if you don't
colours-
mind, I open it. It's nice. It's lovely.
yes. If I remember correctly, my colleagues from the High Commission will remind me. This is the soil. It represents the soil of Mozambique. And this represents, again, the blood that was felt in the liberation of the country. The book here represents education. And this one represents production, productivity.
Palestine.
Green, yeah.
It looks like Palestine.
Yeah. The green represents the agriculture and the wealth of the country. Mozambique is a big country. It's actually twice the size of the UK. Many people don't realize that.
Excellent.
It's huge. And the white represents peace. The black, what does it represent?
The continent.
The continent of Africa. Yes, it is. So,
Excellent for that.
One
Yes.
question, please.
Yes.
So, Mr. High Commissioner, my question is this: you told us about Mozambique, the positive things, right? So, it's my interest to see in depth what are the problems over there, and you are the representative of those people, Mozambique people here. So, are those people are satisfied? What you have the relations with the West, this the dichotomy of these civilizations?
Yes. Well, I spoke about the positive things that are happening in the country, but as you will know, Mozambique is a developing country and the least developed among developing countries. So we have serious challenges in terms of poverty, in terms of creating prosperity for the entire population of the country. Half of our population are in poverty. And we reduced that after independence from a number of 79%. We brought it down to 54. It was a big reduction in a relatively short space of time in history, but we still have those people living in poverty. So government programs and the society is working towards resolving that. The country has also gone through a devastating internal conflict, which was not properly internal. Many people call it civil war, but it was a war that was moved from outside, apartheid South Africa, and the minority regime of Ian Smith in southern Rhodesia initiated a rebellion supporting people who rebelled against the government and destroyed a lot of infrastructure. But fortunately, 24 years ago, we achieved, we restored peace, because all the other external elements were isolated, were no longer there. We have a free South Africa, we have free Zimbabwe, and we, as Mozambicans, then we initiated a dialogue that resulted in the rebel movement becoming a political party. So we restored peace. And the challenges of today are the challenges of many nations to build a prosperous country for all the people of the country. Now, our relationship with the UK and other countries is welcomed by Mozambicans, because we deal with all countries of the world, and many of them actually supporting the development of Mozambique. We have huge bilateral programs to develop the country with the UK, with Germany, with the US, with Canada, Japan, China, India, Brazil, South Africa. All these countries are supporting the development of Mozambique, and Mozambicans know about that. So they appreciate that. They criticize government, or criticize others where they see problems arising even within that collaboration. But this is something that will happen in any society, and we think it's good to keep also checks and balances for governance.
Excellent. Another question? There's ladies' question, and after that, after
I would like to understand, Your Excellency, what is the magnificent thing upon the nation of Mozambique to be part of Commonwealth? What was the outcome of that for the nation of Mozambique?
Well, one is belonging to a group of nations that pursue universal values of democracy, rule of law, good governance, development, balanced development for all members.
Of Mozambique, you mean, or members with the Commonwealth? Sorry, what did you mean about?
I thought you were asking what is important for Mozambique to be a member of the Commonwealth.
No, for the nation of Mozambique.
Yes.
What's the significant thing of being, the nation being part of Commonwealth?
That's what I'm trying
what
to
it
explain.
says. That's what it's trying to
The
say.
last word I
That's
couldn't
what-
hear it well, sorry.
That's what.
Yeah, that's what I'm trying to say, that all these things that are happening within the Commonwealth are important for Mozambique. We belong to this group, it's important. But beyond that, we also have programs of technical cooperation. And the good thing about the technical cooperation within the Commonwealth is it's not just technical assistance from Canada or from the UK, Australia or New Zealand, which are the developed countries of the Commonwealth. It's assistance among developing countries. We get assistance from Trinidad and Tobago in oil and gas. We get assistance from Ghana in terms of what they have done, experienced in other things. And then you have other beautiful things that happen within the Commonwealth Games, the Youth Forum, the Women's Forum, the Students Forum, the Teachers Associations Forum. All these fora help Mozambique to develop further, and we learn from each other.
Next one, please.
A nice presentation regarding culture. There are so many cultures. I belong from the Asia, especially from Balochistan, Pakistan. There are small cultures, very ancient cultures, but they are affected from the multiculturalism. How preserve these cultures from the multiculturalism?
Oh, that's a very good question, especially in Canada, where we have a multiculturalism policy. I'm going to speak now as a person, my own opinion. My own opinion is there should always be a host culture. That other cultures should always be welcomed into your nation, but there should be a host culture that is supported and is understood, and if you like, there's an adventure behind it, where it's constantly evolving, whether that's through the law or whether that's through the arts or the sciences. I believe that host culture is very important to preserve, but we should always welcome other communities in. So what I'm really saying is, from where I'm from, whereas Canada, you have a multiculturalism policy, it's very difficult to say what defines a Canadian. And I think that's very important. So I would always say that we must be very mindful of a cultural history of the nation. Now, having said that, I'd add one more thing. And I think this is very important. Actually, I heard Lord Ashdown talk about this just the other day. And I agree with him. What he's talking about is that whenever we try, if you look at recent history particularly, whenever we try to force a nation to define themselves as one thing only, we tend to see violence. Because each individual now feels a sense of belonging to many different types of communities, whether that's you're a technologist, you're a techie, or whether you're a ballerina, or whether you grew up in New York, but you've landed in Somalia. You want to maybe belong at that moment in time, but as soon as we try and make ourselves one thing only, it tends to upset our individuality. So I hope that isn't too long-winded, but I personally believe that there's a host culture, but we should always invite others in.
Another question?
I have a question for you, ma'am.
You're absolutely right, because our research is beginning to unearth this. It's not just actually about a message that a particular institution, whether it's the government or otherwise, wants to propagate. It is a question, is very much linked to the money flows. So we've just unearthed some really interesting data on Syria, for instance. We talk about Venezuela at the moment. Chavez was a master of propaganda with his Sunday night programs of El Presidente. We're of course looking at Russia. We're looking at ISIS and China. I completely concur. On the one hand, you have to look. It's two sides of the same coin, isn't it? When you look at propaganda, the other side of the coin is corruption.
Yeah.
So you have to be very careful. What we're trying to do, and hopefully we'll be successful, is we're going to give a guide to propaganda. Within 7 months, you'll be able to tell.
That's good.
You'll be able to tell when you're watching the news or reading a newspaper, wherever you are in the world. You'll be able to hopefully tell, especially if you're running a newspaper, whether what the story is true or not. I'll just give you an example. I heard recently in one of the Middle East countries that there was a terrible massacre of 100 people. And within seconds, there was a story about a cycling marathon in that country. What did the Western media report? They reported on a cycling marathon. So we just have to be mindful of that. And I think this is born out of a really important thing, is that we, with our shared values, within the Commonwealth and elsewhere, you can't create a counter-narrative to propaganda. It just gets lost. It gets lost. But what you can do is enable the people to understand what they're listening to. And I think, hopefully we'll cut through.
Excellent. Any other questions? Yes, please.
To follow on to that, do you think that it's a very modern occurrence, the need to assist people to understand what they read?
Oh, there's such good questions in this room. We just published today on that. We just published a history of propaganda. And if I may, I'm just going to give you a copy of it. But the answer is yes, there is a very definite history of this. You can map the skills through the past couple of decades. You can really map it and see how people have become better and better. And by the way, it's not just the advent of technology and social media. It was there long before, long before. So I'd be happy to give you a report on that.
Any more questions? Ladies and gentlemen, please put your hand together for our host and our guest.